And the idea is what we're going to do, and this is actually two parts, so I'm going to kind of, I don't know, move this around a little bit. I'll squeeze it up there. All right. I'm going to put it right there. Good. So we've got this formula. It says x minus 4 equals negative 3. And I want you to think of that like a recipe. And this table is if you put in this, the top row is kind of like if you insert your ingredients, the bottom row is what do you get in your output. So you can think of this as your input and your output. So let's take a look at that first one, negative 1. All right, so if you input a negative 1, what do you get on your output? So temporarily, I want you to ignore that negative 3. So if you input a negative 1, negative 1 minus 4 is the same thing as negative 1 plus a negative 4, so that's negative 5. And so that's how they get a negative 5 right there. All right. So now we're going to input a 0. So I'm going to take that formula, which is x minus 4, but now I'm going to input a 0 minus 4, and 0 minus 4 is negative 4. So that means this guy right here is going to be a negative 4. All right. And then our next input is going to be a 1. So let's zoom back out. And so our recipe, x minus 4, but now we're going to input a 1, so it becomes 1 minus 4, and 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So that means this guy goes right here, and that's a negative 3. And then zooming out, our next input is going to be a 2. And you get the idea. So our recipe is x minus 4, but now we're going to input a 2. So now you got 2 minus 4, and that's negative 2. So our output right here is a negative 2. And then the last recipe, so to speak, is going to be x minus 4, but we're going to input a 3. 3 minus 4 equals negative 1, so it's a negative 1 right there. So now the idea is, if our goal all along was to have an answer of negative 3, because that's what this negative 3 is for, which input gives us the winning solution? Well, the answer is right here. The input of 1 gives us the winning solution of negative 3. So that means 1 is our solution. It's the winner. It's the winning input. All right, so here we're just going to solve the following equation. So this is basically kind of like what we were doing in previous videos. You've got 5m is equal to 14. And we want to get m all by itself, so we're going to divide both sides by 5. So 5 divided by 5 gives us 1. So that's m is equal to. Now, because 14 divided by 5 is not a nice, perfect whole number, we're just going to leave it as 14/5. So your solution right here is 14/5. All right, so we've got, let's see, solve the equation. So it's x minus 9 is equal to 21. And so how is that x connected to the 9? It's a minus 9, so we're going to add 9 to both sides. And that basically undoes that little section. So you get x is equal to 30. So so our answer is 30. X is equal to 30. Now, how do you check the solution? Well, you go back into your original equation, x minus 9 is 21, and because we think x is a 30, you're going to put 30 minus 9, and we want to make sure it equals 21, and since 30 minus 9 is 21, that's a true statement, and so that means our answer of 30 is correct. Now we're going to solve again, and then again, it says that we are also supposed to check. So solve and then check. And so you've got negative 14 is equal to 4x plus 5. So the idea is, first, it's kind of like working outside in. So we know that x is connected to the 4 by multiplication, but you also have this addition out here. So if you think about the order of operations, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And if we were solving an equation, we had to follow the order steps. First, we had to do parentheses. Then we did exponents. Then we did multiplication. Then we did addition and subtraction. Now, when you're solving an algebraic equation, you're doing it backwards. So that actually means first we have to take care of the addition and subtraction. Then we're going to do the multiplication and division. So we're going to look over here, and we have some addition. So we have to take care of it. And what do I mean by that? It means we have to undo it. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. And plus 5 minus 5 kind of undoes each other. So you get 4x is equal to, and then this is going to be negative 19. And that's because on scratch paper, we just did negative 14 minus 5. And negative 14 minus 5 is the same thing as negative 14 plus negative 5. So that's our negative 19. And so now that we've taken care of the addition and subtraction, now we're going to look at, we're climbing the ladder, now we're going to do multiplication and division. And we see that we have some multiplication right here. So how do you undo it? You divide both sides by 4. And so 4 divided by 4 is 1. So you get x is equal to, and we're just going to leave it as that fraction because 19 is not divisible nicely by 4. So our answer is negative 19 fourths. Now, if we were supposed to check it, all right, so how would you check it? Well, let's start by writing the equation. Negative 14 is equal to 4x plus 5. Now, we think x is equal to negative 19 fourths. All right, so how do we check if we're right? Well, you're going to replace that x with the answer that we think it is, negative 19 fourths. Then you add in the 5. And then we're going to multiply and solve this side to see if it equals this. So first thing we have to do is multiply, because this time, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, we're not doing algebra. We're just going to do parentheses first, then exponents, then multiplication and division, then addition and subtraction. So right here, that 4 over 4 equals 1 over 1. So we really get this 4 times negative 19 fourths is going to equal negative 19, and then we have plus 5. And negative 19 plus 5 is negative 14, and that's exactly the answer we wanted. So we just showed that the answer really is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, negative 19 fourths. Now they're solving the equation, but this time it's getting a little fancier because now we have a distributive property to deal with. So with this, I know that we have the distributive property because we have 2 next to a quantity. And that means you're going to multiply, which means we have to use the distributive property, because this is like a number, but it's kind of broken up into 2 parts. So first we have to do 2 times x, and then we have to do 2 times negative 1. So 2 times x is 2x, and then 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, and then we just bring down the minus 4 equals 0. Now let's do a little bit of simplifying. So the simplifying is 2x minus 6. Now how the heck did I get that? Well, over here on scratch paper, what I just did was this minus 2 minus 4. So minus 2 minus 4, becomes negative 2 plus negative 4. All right, remember, when you're subtracting, the first number stays the same, the minus sign becomes a plus sign, and the second number changes to its opposite. So this 4 becomes a negative 4, and that's how I get negative 6. All right, and so getting back to the problem, so this piece right here equals minus 6 or negative 6, and then we get is equal to 0. So now we officially have a nice algebra problem to solve. And what are we going to do? Well, we're going to add 6 to both sides. So this kind of undoes each other. So we end up with 2x is equal to 6. And then we're going to divide both sides by 2. And you get x equals 3. So one of the things I want to point out, look how nice and neat this equal sign is. Woohoo! It's all straight, nice straight line here. We did the distributive property. That's tricky. We did some subtraction of integers. That's always tricky for my students. And then we had to do the algebra. And in this case, we call this a two-step, because first you had to add by 6, then you had to divide by 2. So that's called a two-step equation. So our answer, x is equal to 3. And that is what you would put right here. X is equal to 3. All right, getting even more fancy. So we have negative 2 times 4n plus 2 equals 14. And once again, we see that we have a distributive property. We know that we're going to multiply negative 2 times 4n, and we're going to multiply negative 2 times positive 2. All right, and so that becomes negative 8n, because negative 2 times 4 is negative 8n. Now we're going to do negative 2 times positive 2, so that becomes negative 4. And then I just bring down that equals 14. Now I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And so then minus 4 plus 4 kind of undo each other. So you end up with negative 8n is equal to 18. Now we divide both sides by negative 8. And negative 8 divided by negative 8 is 1. So you end up with n is equal to 18 eighths. Now that negative sign, we're allowed to just kind of, it seems arbitrary, we're allowed to move it to the top. In fact, it's kind of traditional that you put it to the top. And so that's equal to negative 9 over 4, because I simplified it. I divided both the numerator by 2 and the denominator by 2, and so that's how I got n is equal to negative 9 fourths is what I would put right there. All right, so we're going to solve this equation. Now you'll notice we've got variables on both sides, and you'll also notice we've got the distributive property twice. And so it's just a long problem. It's not complicated, it's just long. So the distributive property here is going to be positive 8, because I want you to think of this as a positive 8 times x, and then it's going to be positive 8 times negative 8. And kind of similar is over here, our distributive property is going to be negative 8 times x, and then it's going to be negative 8 times negative 8. So we've got the distributive property twice. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring down that 7, and then we have positive 8 times x, that's positive 8x, and then I've got positive 8 times negative 8, so that's negative 64, and that's equal to, and I'm going to just bring that 1 straight down. And then we've got negative 8 times x, so that's negative 8x. And then we've got negative 8 times negative 8, so that's positive 64. So now we've got variables on the left, variables on the right. We've got constants. These are constants on the left and constants on the right. So let's do a little bit of simplifying. First, the left side. All right, so because this is a positive 7, we know that positive 7 plus a negative 64, or positive 7, minus 64, either way you could think of it, is going to give you a negative 57 as your answer. And then on the right side, I'm going to do a little bit of hocus pocus here. This is really a minus 8x. So I'm going to start that right there. And then this says positive 1, because that's a positive 1, plus 64. So that ends up being plus 65. All right, so now I'm going to add 8x to both sides. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want this to go away. And so we end up with 16x minus 57 on the left, and we get 65 on the right. And so now, I'm kind of moving it around, we're going to add 57 to both sides because that's going to make these go away. And you end up with 16x is equal to, now what is 65 plus 57? So that's 122. And now we're going to divide both sides by 16. And we end up with, so that equals 1. So we end up with x is equal to, now what we're going to do is we're going to divide. I don't think 16 goes into 122 perfectly. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this fraction, which is 122 sixteenths, and we're going to simplify by dividing both the numerator and the denominator by 2. So that gives us, let's see, 61 over 8. And that's our answer. X is equal to 61 over 8. Holy moly. I want to point something out. First off, look at all this work. That's a lot of work. And then I want to show you, it's not all that good. But my equal signs, I was trying to make them straight. Trying to just do that ladder. And it almost kind of comes down to a pyramid because you've got all this work up here and you're gradually working your way down to a solution. All right, so this says to solve the equation. So you've got a distributive property here, you've got a distributive property here, you've got a distributive property here, you've got variables all over the place. Dang, this is looking like it's going to be a lot of work. So let's get working on this. So we've got our equation right here, and you can see that we've got distributive property here. We've got a distributive property here. And then lastly, we've got a distributive property here. All right, so let's get going. So 5 times 4z is 20z. And then you've got 5 times negative 1, which is negative 5. Now remember, this is a negative 4 that we're distributing here. So negative 4 times z becomes negative 4z. And again, still negative 4. Negative 4 times positive 9 gives us negative 36. And then we've got equals. And then 6 times z is 6z. And 6 times positive 1. And if you weren't sure, this is a positive 6 because when there's no symbol, it's automatically positive. And so you get positive 6 as our distributive property there. And so let's do a little bit of simplifying on the left. Nothing to simplify here. You can't add 6 and 6 and get 12, all right? Because they're not like terms. But over here, we have 20z minus 4z, so that gives us 16z. And then you've got right here, you've got negative 5 minus 36. So that's going to be a negative 41. All right. And if you're not sure, go on scratch paper and do that integer stuff on scratch paper. Nothing to simplify on the right side, so I just kind of copy it down again. So now I've got variables on the left and the right. I've got constants on the left and the right. So I need all the variables on one side. I need all the constants on the other. All right, so I'm going to subtract both sides by 6z because that makes these go away. And so 16 minus 6z, 16z minus 6z gives us 10z. Minus 41 is equal to 6 because these guys go away. Now I'm going to add 41 to both sides because that makes these guys go away. And you end up with 10z is equal to 47. And then we're going to divide both sides by 10. And that ends up giving us z equals, and I'm just going to leave it as 47 tenths because 47 is not divisible by 10 perfectly. This fraction can't be reduced. So our answer is 47 tenths. So right there, our answer is 47 tenths. All right, we're going to be solving, and really this is just more of the same. The only difference is now we've got some decimals going on here. So I'm going to get that out of the way. Here's our problem. And so the idea is, first thing we're going to do is we're going to add 1.5 to both sides. And that makes these go away. So you end up with 6.8x is equal to 20.4. I think I did that right. And then we're going to divide, let's give me a little bit more room here. We're going to divide both sides by 6.8. So I'm getting out my calculator because there's no way I'm going to divide this in my head. This part I could divide in my head because 6.8 divided by 6.8 is 1. So you end up with x is equal to, now I'm going to type in 20.4 divided by 6.8. And that gives me, oh geez, I could have done that, 3. That equals 3. And so our answer for x, way up there, is 3. We have solving an equation, but this time it's got fractions. And really, I don't want you to be afraid of fractions. I want you to know that fractions are the exact same thing as numbers, just plain old boring numbers. They just look a little different. All right, so here's our equation. And just like normal, first thing we're going to do is we're going to subtract both sides by 1/4. And we know that plus 1/4 minus 1/4 kind of undoes each other. So that gives us negative 7/8 x on the left side. Now, what does the right side equal? Well, the right side, what we need to do is over here on scratch paper, we need to do 1/8 minus 1/4. And you need to get common denominators. So we're going to multiply this by 2 and 2. And so that gives you 1/8 minus 2/8. That equals negative 1/8. So that means over here, 1/8 minus 1/4 is equal to negative 1/8. All right, so now we have this guy. And now how are we going to get rid of that negative 7/8? Well, a couple of ways. One way we could use division. The other way was we can multiply by the reciprocal. I think I'm going to do multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply by a negative 8/7. And I'm going to do that on both sides because, of course, that's the rule. So what's going to happen on the left? Well, negative 8 times negative 7, I'm going to be a little explicit here, is positive 56. And then the denominator, 7 times 8, is positive 56. So the left, you end up equaling 1x. So that's really just x. Now the right side, negative 1 times negative 8 gives us positive 8. And then 8 times 7 gives us 56. But then 8 56ths can be simplified because both the numerator and the denominator can be divided by 8. So 8 divided by 8 is 1, and 56 divided by 8 is 7. So our answer is 1/7. So x equals 1/7, and that is what we would put in our answer. Let's see, right here, 1/7. Big thing I want to point out, again, I've kind of said it numerous times, is the importance of keeping your equal signs all in a line, doing some scratch work over here on the side, and that's working out piece at a time. And again, most students struggle with fractions and integers and stuff that has nothing to do with algebra. Like, most students understand the algebra concept. It's this nitty-gritty arithmetic and fractions and stuff that gets in the way. And that wraps up this video.